Well, it's time for another movie review. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. Going to look at another classic from the 80s. In fact, three classics from the 80s. Star Trek's 2, 3, and 4. Given how old they are and how famous they are, I'm not going to do an in-depth analysis of the shows themselves, but rather look at some of the interesting legal issues that crop up in those films. Hello, my name's Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. The 1980s were really the golden age of filmmaking as far as I'm concerned, certainly of science fiction. I've talked about some other classics, notably Blade Runner, which came out the same year, in 1982, as the first of the films I'll be talking about today, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. 2 years after that, 84, came out Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, and then 1986, Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. They're really a trilogy that all go together. If anyone watching this isn't familiar with them, I mean, it's the movies from the original Star Trek series. You've got Captain Kirk, Spock, and McCoy as the three main characters. The story arc between the three films is they encounter a nemesis from the original TV series, Khan Noonien Singh, who almost destroys the Enterprise. Spock sacrifices his life to save the Enterprise, and then he's reincarnated. You have to watch the film to see how that works. And then they try to go save him and then come back home to face the music. Now, I mean, just briefly to talk about the films, I mean, they're a great trilogy of films. I always enjoyed Star Trek. I'm one of those guys who says, why can you only like Star Trek or Star Wars? I'm a fan of both. To me, the original Star Trek movies and the original Star Trek series, that's kind of like episodes 4, 5, and 6 of Star Wars. They're the classics, they're the really good stuff. And why are they really good? Same reason why these three films are good. You've got the conflict, but also the love between those three main characters. They're always bickering like old married couple, but at the end of the day, they really are great friends. They work together to save the universe. It's got long odds. Lots of really bad stuff happens to them. This is good filmmaking. And for much of it, they've got a really rookie crew, a trainee crew, in fact, on the Enterprise, to keep the odds stacked against them. So it's different from the Next Generation, where it's, you know, the pride and joy of the fleet, all the best officers. Star Trek Next Generation, I mean, I like it in its own right, but it's a little bit of the Mary Sue version of Star Trek. The acting, I mean, yeah, William Shatner, bit of a ham actor, but frankly, I love his acting, the style. It's Captain Kirk. It's pure 80s fare. I mean, movies were just great back then. Now, there are some interesting legal issues, and I'd like to look at, how would those play out in Canada today under our criminal code? So the main thing that comes to mind is the theft of the Enterprise in Star Trek III, where Spock's immortal soul is in danger. It's actually inhabiting Dr. McCoy's body. They need to get to Spock's reincarnated body so they can put his soul back into his body. Starfleet won't give them permission, so the crew of the Enterprise, they steal the Enterprise out of Stardock. It's a classic scene. I love the way it plays out, with the music and the escape and the Excelsior trying to chase them. But, I mean, this is obviously a theft, and it's a really big theft. In Canada, it would be a theft over $5,000. Now, the Enterprise is probably worth way more than $5,000, despite the fact that apparently money doesn't exist in the 23rd century. We learned that in Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. But clearly, things have some intrinsic worth. Clearly, the Enterprise took thousands of man-hours to build. It's a huge vessel. I think it's almost a kilometer long. It has a crew of over 300. And it doesn't belong to Captain Kirk. It's captain, and he's an admiral by that film, but he still doesn't have the authority or the right in law to take it. Then, of course, there's Scotty's sabotage of the Excelsior, which is sent to capture the Enterprise or prevent them from stealing it. Mischief under $5,000 is the first charge that comes to mind under the Canadian Criminal Code. There is also a charge of sabotage under Section 52 of the Criminal Code that says everyone's guilty of an indictable offense. who does a prohibited act for a purpose prejudicial to the safety, security, or defense of Canada. Clearly, that's what he does in damaging the Excelsior. Of course, before they even got to stealing the Enterprise, there's a bit of a crime spree where there's an assault police officer, another assault police officer, escape lawful custody or breaking someone out of lawful custody. We've got careless use of a firearm. We've got mischief under or maybe over $5,000 for that panel that Sulu blows up. And then, of course, when it comes time to get transported over to the Enterprise, Uhura's got a point firearm and a forcible confinement when she has the adventure-seeking young lieutenant go and sit in the storage closet at gunpoint. Now, in law, we do have a defense of necessity. Would Captain Kirk have been, and his crew been able to rely on that defense? We look back to the 1980s, the cases involving the famous abortionist, Dr. Morgentaler. He tried raising defense of necessity. So, in fact, the 1975 Morgentaler case, Justice Dixon, in debating whether a defense of necessity even exists, said that, quote, "If it does exist, it can go no further than to justify non-compliance in urgent situations of clear and imminent peril, when compliance with the law is demonstrably impossible. No system of positive law can recognize any principle which would entitle a person to violate the law because on his view the law conflicted with some higher social value." There's then another Supreme Court decision called PERKA, P-E-R-K-A, which lays out in more detail the necessity defense. And it lays out three criteria. One, there must be imminent peril or danger. Two, there must be no reasonable legal alternative to the course of action undertaken. And three, a proportionality between the harm inflicted and the harm avoided must exist. I don't think that Canadian law would ever recognize the peril to one's soul as being an imminent danger. I think they're only ever talking about physical danger for reasons that we know. I mean, Canada isn't a Christian country. The United Federation of Planets isn't a Christian entity in the Star Trek movies. So Captain Kirk wouldn't have been able to rely on that. It seems that he didn't even intend to rely on it because in Star Trek 4, they head back to face the music. It seems clear that they know they're all going to go to jail or whatever it is that the Federation does in the 23rd century. But then they manage to save the Earth again. The Earth is facing another peril. The voyage home, they time travel back to the 1980s, do some stuff to save the world, and then they return. So since they saved the world, they get a pardon. So that raises another interesting thing. You hear about presidential pardons in the United States. Do pardons exist in Canada? And, in fact, they do. In Canada, what we have is what's called the Royal Prerogative of Mercy. That's a power that the Governor-General has, and the Governor-General gets it in two places. One, from the letters patent that established the office of Governor-General, and secondly, in Section 748 and 748.1 of the Criminal Code of Canada. So these allow for exceptional circumstances that the Governor-General can pardon an individual. And saving the whole planet would seem like maybe one of those exceptional circumstances where one might give a pardon. So interestingly, even under Canadian law, the crew of the Enterprise would have been able to receive the pardon that they receive at the end of Star Trek 4. So there's interesting legal things even in some enjoyable popcorn science fiction films from the 1980s. If you haven't watched those three films, or you haven't watched them in quite a while, I recommend you watch them. Watch all three of them together, because as I say, it is a trilogy. I hope you found this video interesting. Obviously, it's not legal advice. If you need legal advice, call a lawyer. You can call another lawyer or myself. As always, my website and phone number are listed below. If there's show topics you'd like to see me cover or a movie you'd like to see me review, please send an email to the email address listed below or leave a comment in the comment section. And if you found this video at all interesting, helpful, or informative, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and following us on social media.